The planet Viridian had once been a peaceful place. Its people, known for their wisdom and technological advancements, lived in harmony with nature and each other. They had made remarkable strides in science, medicine, and culture, and their cities shimmered with towering structures of glass and steel. Yet now, those once thriving cities lay in ruins, smoke rising from the crumbled remains of homes and schools. Viridian was under siege, its people helpless, unable to defend themselves against the overwhelming forces that now ravaged their world. For weeks, the Viridionians had sent out desperate distress signals, hoping that anyone would hear their cries. The leaders of the planet, once confident in their neutrality within the galaxy, now found themselves abandoned by their supposed allies. The Galactic Council, a powerful collective of planets, had been alerted to the invasion, but they offered no help. They were more concerned with their own political struggles than with saving a peaceful world. Every plea for aid went unanswered, every request for intervention ignored. In the center of Viridian's largest surviving city, the people, gathered in what remained of the central square. They were tired, broken, but they were not yet ready to give up. Their homes had been destroyed, their families scattered, and yet they still held hope that something could change. But that hope was beginning to wane, and the future felt uncertain. A young woman named Lyra stood at the front of the crowd, her face painted with soot and despair. As one of the leaders of the Viridionian resistance, she had seen her world fall apart before her eyes. Yet, she refused to surrender. She clutched a small, flickering communication device in her hands. It had been her last attempt to send a message to the galaxy, to the beings who had once promised to protect her people. "Please," she whispered into the device, her voice breaking with emotion. "We need help. We are outnumbered. We are dying. Our world will fall unless someone hears us." For a moment, the device was silent. Then the faint sound of a response crackled through. But it wasn't the voice of an ally. It was the cold, dismissive tone of the Galactic Council's representative. "We are aware of the situation, Viridian," the voice said. "However, your request for assistance is denied. Resources are limited, and your planet does not warrant the Council's intervention. We suggest you surrender to the invaders and submit to their rule." Lyra's heart sank as she heard the words. The hope she had held onto for so long began to crumble. The Council, the supposed guardians of peace in the galaxy, had turned their back on them. They had abandoned them to face the invaders alone. She looked out at the crowd, her people who had fought so hard for their freedom. The news would devastate them. They would lose faith. Yet, even in that moment of despair, a flicker of something different sparked in Lyra's heart. She couldn't accept the fate the Council had decided for them. She wouldn't. "We will not surrender," she declared aloud, her voice rising above the crowd. "We will fight, and we will survive. There is still hope. If the galaxy won't help us, we will help ourselves." As the crowd listened in silence, a faint noise filled the air, a sound that had not been heard in weeks. The hum of a ship's engines. It wasn't one of the invaders. It wasn't a galactic fleet. No, this was something different. It was something human. Lyra's heart raced. Could it be? Had the humans, the warriors known for their resilience, heard their call? She didn't know, but one thing was clear. For the first time in days, there was a glimmer of hope. The humans had arrived. This first part sets the stage for the conflict, with the Viridionians feeling abandoned by the galactic community and facing overwhelming odds. The introduction of the humans arriving offers a glimmer of hope, setting the stage for an epic turnaround in the story. The human warship, the Resolute, cut through the stars at incredible speed. Its sleek, imposing frame was a symbol of Earth's military might, one of the last remnants of a once great military force. The captain of the ship, a seasoned veteran named Captain Marcus Steele, stood in the command center, staring out into the vast expanse of space. He had seen many battles in his time, but something about this mission felt different. The distress signal from Viridian had been brief, but it had been enough. A desperate plea for help from a world on the brink of collapse. The Galactic Council had refused to intervene, dismissing the Veridionians as an insignificant species. To most galactic powers, the Veridionians were just another peaceful civilization. Their advanced technology had made them rich and prosperous, but they were weak when it came to defense. Their allies had turned their backs on them, leaving them vulnerable to a ruthless alien invasion. But not the humans. Earth had always been a world of resilience. Humans had fought wars, survived disasters, and built empires from the ground up. Marcus Steele knew that when a planet cried out for help, humans answered. Earth might not have the largest fleet in the galaxy anymore, but their spirit and determination were unmatched. "Captain," Lieutenant Zoe Harris spoke, interrupting his thoughts. She stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the massive holographic display of Viridian's coordinates. "We'll be entering Viridian's atmosphere in 20 minutes. Marcus nodded. "Make sure the crew is ready. This won't be an easy fight, and it's likely that we'll be outnumbered. But we have to remember that we are here because we believe in protecting those who can't protect themselves." Zoe glanced at him, a slight smile crossing her face. "You've always said that humanity's greatest strength is our ability to adapt. Let's show them what that means." Marcus turned his attention back to the display, the map of Viridian system stretching out before him. The invading alien fleet had set up a blockade around the planet. It was clear that they had no intention of letting the Viridionians survive. But Marcus had a plan, one that used the element of surprise and humanity's unique ability to think on their feet. "All hands, prepare for combat," Marcus ordered, his voice firm. "This is a rescue mission, not a war. Our goal is to liberate Viridian, not to conquer it." In the ship's lower decks, soldiers suited up in their battle armor. Their faces were set with determination as they prepared for what they knew would be the most dangerous mission they'd ever faced. These men and women were not afraid. They were humans, and they were willing to risk everything to save a world they had never visited. As the Resolute approached Viridian, Marcus stood in front of the crew, looking out over his team. "No one else came to help," he said, his voice steady. "But we are here, and we are going to do what others wouldn't. We fight for those who can't fight for themselves." With a final glance at the planet below, the ship entered the atmosphere. Marcus knew the battle ahead would be brutal. The aliens who invaded Viridian were merciless, and they would not go down without a fight. But he also knew one thing. The humans had arrived, and the tide of battle was about to change. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now the aliens would learn what it meant to face the wrath of a species that never backed down. The humans had come to protect, and they would not rest until Viridian was free. The Resolute cut through Viridian's atmosphere like a sharp knife through the dark. Below, the once beautiful planet was now a battleground. Clouds of smoke spiraled into the sky from what used to be bustling cities. Alien warships, massive and intimidating, hovered above, their dark silhouettes a stark contrast to the bright burning embers below. The Viridionians, outnumbered and desperate, had no chance against such overwhelming force. They were fighting for survival, but with each passing hour their chances grew slimmer. Captain Marcus Steele stood at the command center, his eyes focused on the screen before him. The incoming planet's surface flickered with light, showing the destruction left behind by the invaders. His jaw tightened as he watched the scenes unfold. The planet was on the brink of collapse, and the situation was worse than any intelligence report had suggested. "Captain, the alien blockade is massive," Lieutenant Zoe Harris said from her station. She adjusted her headset, scanning the data. "We're going to have to cut through their lines if we want to reach the planet's surface. They're not going to let us land without a fight." Marcus nodded, but his mind was already moving ahead, formulating a plan. He had led many battles, but this wasn't about territory or conquest. It was about saving lives, and that meant outthinking the enemy, something humanity had always been good at. "Prepare the drop pods," Marcus ordered. "We'll make a stealth approach. We'll hit them where it hurts." Zoe raised an eyebrow. "Stealth? We're flying right into a war zone." Marcus smiled grimly. Exactly. We don't need to fight the entire fleet. We just need to get our people on the ground and make an impact. The enemy doesn't expect us to fight this way, and that's our advantage. The crew worked quickly, preparing for the high-risk operation. The drop pods were equipped with the latest technology, cloaking fields, adaptive camouflage, and enhanced thrusters to make their descent as undetectable as possible. Marcus had ordered the ship to disable its main engines to avoid detection by the enemy radar, opting for manual control and quiet maneuvering through the dense clouds. As the drop pods were launched, Marcus's voice echoed through the ship. Remember, our mission is clear. Get to the surface, locate the Viridionian resistance, and help them coordinate a counterattack. We don't just fight to win, we fight to save. The Resolute remained in orbit, cloaked in the darkness while the soldiers made their descent toward Viridian's surface. Inside the pods, the soldiers felt the intense force of the descent, but there was no fear, only resolve. They knew what was at stake. They knew that if they failed, it wouldn't just be the Viridionians who lost. Humanity's very future depended on their success. On the surface, Viridian's landscape was a mix of destruction and desolation. The invading forces had established their stronghold in the heart of the largest city, where the resistance was hiding. As the pods touched down, the soldiers quickly disembarked, their boots hitting the scorched earth. The air was thick with smoke, and the sounds of distant explosions echoed through the ruined streets. "We're on the ground," Zoe reported, checking her wristcom. "Let's move out." The humans had arrived. Their mission was now clear: to help the Viridionians fight back, to protect the innocent, and to make sure that the invaders learned the hard way that humans would never back down from a fight. The tide of battle had changed. The invaders would soon learn that humanity's will to fight was something no one could ignore. This part builds the tension as the humans make their daring arrival on Viridian. The strategy to use stealth and surprise to infiltrate enemy lines sets up the upcoming action, with the soldiers landing on the planet's surface, ready to begin their mission. The tone is one of determination and hope, emphasizing humanity's resolve to fight for those who cannot defend themselves. The war had raged on for days, with no sign of stopping. The invaders had taken control of Viridian's largest cities, forcing the planet's people into hiding. But now, humanity had arrived, and they were ready to fight back. Captain Marcus Steele watched from a hidden command post as his team assembled with the Viridionian resistance. Their mission was clear: disrupt the invaders' supply lines, take down their command centers, and give the planet's people a fighting chance. But the challenge was enormous. The enemy was numerous, their technology far more advanced, and their war machines terrifyingly powerful. Still, Marcus wasn't worried. He knew one thing that the invaders didn't. Humans had always thrived when the odds were stacked against them. They were experts at thinking outside the box, using creativity to overcome challenges that others thought impossible. "Let's talk strategy," Marcus said, addressing the Viridionian resistance leaders in a small underground bunker. The air inside was thick with tension, but it was also filled with a quiet determination. These people had seen their world torn apart. They were desperate, but now they had hope. Zoe Harris, the lieutenant who had accompanied Marcus on the mission, stood beside him. She glanced at the resistance fighters, who watched intently. "The invaders are strong, but they're not invincible. They rely on numbers and overwhelming firepower. Our strength lies in speed, surprise, and hitting them where it hurts." Marcus pointed to a holographic map of the city, zooming in on the invaders' main stronghold. "We'll divide our forces into smaller teams and target their weak points. We'll hit them fast, disrupt their communication, and take out key infrastructure." One of the Viridionian leaders, a tall man named Rylan, frowned. "But we are outnumbered. We don't have the strength to face them head-on." "We don't need to," Marcus replied calmly. "You're right. We can't win a straight-up fight. But we can strike from the shadows, take down their defenses one by one, and cripple their ability to fight back. We'll create chaos. And in the confusion, your people can rise up." Zoe nodded. We have a plan to use the city's tunnels to our advantage. The invaders won't expect us to move underground, and we can attack them from unexpected angles. Rylan hesitated, then spoke with resolve. This is our home. If there's even a chance we can win, we'll follow your plan. Marcus gave him a reassuring smile. Then we'll do it together. Let's make them regret ever setting foot on Viridian. The first phase of the plan was set in motion. The teams, each consisting of humans and Viridionians, moved through the darkened streets. The invaders had set up barriers and patrols, but they were not prepared for the sudden onslaught that came from below. The resistance fighters, guided by human tactics, made their way through the city's hidden tunnels, planting explosives and cutting off the enemy's supply routes. Meanwhile, Marcus and Zoe led a smaller group toward the main communications tower, where they would disable the invaders' ability to coordinate their forces. The tower was heavily guarded, but the humans had come prepared. Using stealth and quick, decisive movements, they took down the guards silently, one by one. It wasn't about brute force, it was about efficiency. In the distance, explosions erupted as the first wave of attacks began. The invaders, caught off guard, scrambled to regroup. The humans had made their move, and there was no turning back. Now, as the chaos spread, the Viridionian people, who had been hiding in fear, began to emerge, ready to fight alongside their new allies. The invaders had underestimated the power of human strategy and resourcefulness. What they didn't know was that the tide of battle had shifted. Humanity had arrived, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that Viridian would not fall. As the human and Viridionian forces pushed forward, the battle raged across the ruined streets of Viridian's largest city. The invaders, stunned by the sudden attacks, struggled to regain control. Their once unbeatable force was now scrambling to defend against an enemy they hadn't anticipated, human ingenuity and the Viridionian spirit fighting side by side. But the humans knew this fight was far from over. They had disrupted the enemy's supply lines, crippled their communications, and forced them into chaos. Yet they still had to secure a victory. To do that, they needed more than just strategy. They needed the heart of the Viridionian people. Captain Marcus Steele knew that the key to winning wasn't just fighting the invaders, but building trust with the Viridionians. They had been abandoned by the galaxy's major powers, their cries for help ignored. Their strength was not just in their technology, but in their unity, something that the invaders didn't understand. Now it was time to unite them. As they moved deeper into the city, Marcus and Lieutenant Zoe Harris met with Rylan, the Viridionian resistance leader. His eyes were tired but filled with a new sense of hope. The previous night's operations had shown them that the humans weren't here just to fight. They were here to help. We've cleared the west side of the city, Rylan reported, his voice steady despite the chaos. We've also contacted some of the local military commanders hiding in the outskirts. They're willing to join forces. Marcus nodded. That's good. The more we have, the stronger our strike will be. Rylan's face darkened slightly. I don't know how much we can trust them. We've had betrayals within our ranks before. It's difficult to know who we can count on. Zoe, standing next to Marcus, gave Rylan a reassuring look. You don't have to do this alone. We've got your back. Together we'll make sure the invaders understand that they can't take your world. The resistance leader studied her for a moment, then nodded. You're right. If anyone can lead us to victory, it's you. I'll trust you and your people. Just then, a small group of Viridionian soldiers approached, led by a woman with a scar across her cheek. She had a commanding presence, her posture confident despite the war-torn city around her. This is Captain Zira, Rylan introduced. She commands the Northern Front. She's one of the few who hasn't given up on Viridian's future. Zira extended a hand, her grip firm. We've lost so much, but we still have our resolve. If the humans are willing to fight with us, then we'll fight with them. We'll make sure the invaders regret ever stepping foot here. Marcus smiled. That's what we need, unity. The more we unite, the stronger we'll become. We'll push them out, not just with weapons, but with the strength of our combined will. Zoe stepped forward, eyes bright with determination. Let's show them what happens when you underestimate us. With the Viridionians now fully committed to the fight, Marcus and his crew began coordinating the next phase of the assault. The plan was set: strike from all angles, cut off their retreat, and bring down their command center once and for all. The first wave of Viridionian fighters, led by Captain Zira, moved out. As they swept through the streets, more Viridionians joined the cause, fighting alongside the humans who had shown them that they weren't alone. Marcus watched as the Allied forces pushed forward. What had started as a rescue mission was now becoming something far greater, an alliance forged in the fire of battle, an unbreakable bond between two species determined to protect their home. The invaders had underestimated the humans, and now, with the power of the Viridionian resistance behind them, the tide of the battle was about to turn. Together, humans and Viridionians were a force that no one could stop. In this part, the theme of alliance and unity between the humans and Viridionians is explored. Despite past betrayals and struggles, both sides come together to fight a common enemy. The growing trust between the two groups strengthens the resolve to win, setting the stage for a powerful collaboration in the battles ahead. The battle had escalated in the last few hours. What had started as a series of small, precise strikes against the invaders' infrastructure had now become an all-out assault. The combined forces of humans and Viridionians were pushing forward, their determination growing stronger with each passing moment. The invaders, caught off guard by the unexpected resistance, were beginning to retreat, but the humans and Viridionians knew that the fight was far from over. Captain Marcus Steele watched from a high vantage point as the city's skyline unfolded before him. The once pristine buildings were now scarred, the streets filled with the sounds of battle, explosions, gunfire, and the cries of both victory and pain. The humans had taken the lead in many areas, but the Viridionians, now fully committed to the cause, were holding their own. "This is it," Marcus said, looking over at Lieutenant Zoe Harris. "We've done more than they thought possible. But we still need to break their will. We need to get to their command center. Once we take it down, they'll have no coordination. They'll fall apart." Zoe nodded, her face set in a determined expression. "We've made progress, but they'll regroup. We can't give them the chance." The humans and Viridionians, having gained control of key areas in the city, moved cautiously but quickly through the streets. Their mission now was to take the enemy's command center, the heart of their operations. Intelligence reports had shown that it was heavily guarded, surrounded by a ring of elite alien forces. The invaders had underestimated the resolve of the humans, but they still held one stronghold: their central command. "We move in from the east," Marcus instructed. "We'll surround them and hit them from all sides. Our goal is to cut off their ability to call for reinforcements. Once we do that, they'll be isolated, vulnerable." The plan was risky, but Marcus knew it was their best shot. The invaders' control over Viridian had begun to falter. The humans had brought something the aliens hadn't counted on: unpredictability. They fought with a kind of desperation that the invaders couldn't understand, a fierce determination to protect a world that wasn't even their own. As the Allied forces made their way toward the command center, they encountered more resistance. The invaders fought back with everything they had left, but their numbers were thinning and their morale was starting to crack. The tide of the battle was shifting, and the invaders knew it. They were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted. Marcus and his team advanced cautiously, taking out alien soldiers one by one, using their superior tactics and strategy. It was clear now: the invaders weren't prepared for the kind of fight humanity brought to the table. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, the humans found a way to turn the tables. "Clear the way," Marcus ordered as they reached the final stretch before the command center. The air was thick with tension, the sound of approaching enemy soldiers growing louder. But Marcus remained calm, focused on the task ahead. They had come this far, and they couldn't afford to lose now. With a final push, the human and Viridionian forces stormed the command center. The alien guards, though numerous, were no match for the combined strength and strategy of the humans and Viridionians. In a matter of minutes, they were overwhelmed. The command center fell, As the last alien soldier fell, Marcus stood in the heart of the command center, looking around at the wreckage. The invaders' communication systems were down, their leadership destroyed. For the first time since they had arrived, the humans and Viridionians could finally breathe a sigh of relief. "We did it," Zoe said, her voice filled with disbelief. "We really did it." Marcus smiled, though it was a smile filled with exhaustion. "This isn't over yet, but we've turned the tide. The invaders will retreat now, and when they do, Viridian will be free." The combined forces of humans and Viridionians had done what no one thought possible. The battle was far from won, but the invaders had been dealt a blow they couldn't recover from. Viridian had a chance, and that was all they needed. The invaders' defeat at the command center sent shockwaves through their ranks. What had been a powerful and seemingly unstoppable force was now scrambling, disoriented, and vulnerable. The humans and Viridionians had dealt them a blow they hadn't expected, and their control over the planet was quickly slipping away. But while the soldiers on the ground celebrated their hard-fought victory, the higher powers, those who had chosen to ignore Viridian's desperate cries for help, were far from pleased. Far away, in the heart of the galaxy, the Galactic Council had been watching the unfolding events with growing concern. The Council, a vast assembly of the most powerful civilizations, had turned a blind eye to Viridian's plight, deeming it an insignificant world. Now they were forced to confront the reality that the humans, those once considered backward and inconsequential, had not only stepped in to help, but were winning. In the pristine halls of the Council's main chamber, leaders from across the galaxy gathered. The room was filled with tension, voices raised in anxious debate. "The humans are disrupting the balance," one leader from the Zenthari Federation spoke harshly. "Their intervention has undermined our authority. We allowed the Viridionians to handle their own affairs, and now this, an unpredictable rogue force threatening the stability we've worked so hard to maintain." Another voice, cooler and more calculating, spoke up. "The Viridionians were already lost. We were right to remain neutral. The humans, however, are making a mockery of our decisions. If they succeed, it will be a symbol of weakness for the Council. We cannot allow that." The representatives from the smaller, less influential worlds nodded in agreement, though some of them wore expressions of deep unease. The humans were proving something that the Council wasn't ready to accept, that even a small, seemingly weak species could turn the tide of a conflict with willpower, creativity, and unyielding courage. "We must act swiftly," the Zenthari leader continued. "Send a message. If the humans succeed, we risk losing our credibility in the galaxy. Let us remind them of their place." Meanwhile, Captain Marcus Steele stood on the surface of Viridian, looking out over the battlefield. The ground was littered with the wreckage of alien ships, and the faint hum of victory still hung in the air. They had pushed the invaders back, at least for now, but there was a looming threat on the horizon. The Council had been watching, and they weren't likely to stay silent for long. His communicator buzzed with a transmission. It was from Zoe. "Captain," she said, her voice grave, "I've just received a report from the Viridionian resistance. The Council's response is coming. They're not happy about our success. We may be facing more than just the invaders now." Marcus sighed. The situation was more complicated than he had hoped. The Viridionians had already suffered from betrayal and neglect by the Council, and now it seemed the galaxy's governing body was about to make things even worse. The humans had come to their aid, and in doing so they had awakened something dangerous, a force that would not take kindly to being shown up by a species they had long regarded as insignificant. "What's their move?" Marcus asked, steeling himself for the worst. Zoe's voice echoed with concern. "They're sending an envoy. The Council wants to meet with us. They're calling it a diplomatic solution." Marcus clenched his jaw. He knew what that meant. The Council wasn't interested in peace, they were interested in control. The humans had defied them, and now they wanted to remind everyone who held the real power in the galaxy. "Prepare for a meeting," Marcus said, his voice calm, but with an edge of resolve. "We're not backing down. Not now. Not ever." The Galactic, Council might have underestimated humanity before, but they had made a dangerous mistake. The humans had shown up not for power, not for glory, but to do what was right. And Marcus Steele would ensure that the Council couldn't twist that into something it wasn't. As the message ended, Marcus turned his attention back to the Viridionian forces, who were now regrouping and preparing to rebuild. The battle had been won, but a new fight was on the horizon. This wasn't just about saving a planet anymore. It was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humanity would no longer be ignored. In this part, the response from the Galactic Council creates a new layer of tension. Their discontent with the human success in Viridian signals that the victory is far from complete. The Council represents a larger political threat that the humans must now confront, setting up a new conflict. The narrative is focused on Marcus's determination to stand firm, despite the pressures from the powerful galactic entities. The fight for Viridian was far from over, even though the invaders were retreating in disarray. The human and Viridionian forces had made tremendous progress, but now, a new challenge loomed on the horizon. Despite the victory at the command center, the galaxy's most powerful political body, the Galactic Council, was preparing to intervene. The humans had upset the balance of power, and the Council would stop at nothing to restore order. Captain Marcus Steele stood in a small makeshift command post, his face illuminated by the soft glow of a tactical map. Around him, his team worked in focused silence, preparing for the next phase of the operation. Viridian had been liberated from the invaders, but now the humans and their Viridionian allies would have to face the forces of the Galactic Council. Zoe Harris, standing nearby, studied the map as well. "The Council is sending an envoy," she said, her voice low. "They're already making moves to take control. The last thing we need right now is more politics." Marcus nodded grimly. "We've fought to free this planet, not to let anyone else come in and claim it. If they want to negotiate, they're going to have to do it on our terms." The Viridionian leaders, who had been listening quietly, exchanged uneasy glances. "The Council's influence has always been powerful," said Rylan, the Viridionian resistance leader. "But they have no right to take what we fought for." "They won't," Marcus replied firmly. "Not while I'm in charge." The meeting was short, as everyone knew what needed to be done. The final phase of the operation would require a direct confrontation with the Council's envoy. The humans and Viridionians had already made it clear that they would not back down from the invaders, but now they had to prove to the Council that their victory was not up for negotiation. The Council had underestimated the strength of the human spirit and the Viridionians' resolve. It was time to show them that when humanity decided to stand, nothing could stand in their way. As the day wore on, the situation became more urgent. The humans and Viridionians had secured control of the city, but the atmosphere was charged with tension. Word came that the Galactic Council's envoy was approaching, ready to make demands. They were coming to speak with Marcus and the Viridionian leaders to decide the planet's fate. "I never thought I'd be dealing with galactic politicians after a battle like this," Zoe remarked, her voice dry. "But here we are." "Politicians only deal with what they can control," Marcus responded, his gaze focused on the distant horizon. "But we've already shown them that Viridian isn't theirs to control." The soldiers and resistance fighters stood ready, their expressions hardening with the knowledge that they were not just protecting Viridian anymore. They were protecting the very idea that every planet, every people deserved to be free. The humans had fought for that freedom, and they would not let anyone take it away now. When the Council's envoy arrived, it was not in the way Marcus had expected. The heavily armored ships that landed in the middle of the city were surrounded by their own military escorts. The envoy leader, a tall alien with a regal posture, stepped forward, flanked by several aides. His eyes scanned the assembled crowd, taking in the humans, the Viridionians, and the destruction that had once been a thriving world. "We come to negotiate," the envoy said, his voice booming with authority. "The Galactic Council demands that you cease your resistance and submit to our control of Viridian. This world belongs to us now." Marcus took a step forward, his eyes locked on the envoys. Viridian doesn't belong to you or the Council. It belongs to the people who fought for it, and they've made it clear they don't want your interference. The envoy's expression darkened. You dare to defy the will of the Council? Marcus stood tall, unwavering. We dare, because we know that what's right doesn't always align with your politics. Viridian is free, and we'll fight to keep it that way. The air was thick with tension. The Council's envoy stood still, considering Marcus's words. For a moment, there was silence, but it was a silence full of meaning. We will not surrender, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the quiet. And neither will Viridian. The envoy seemed to consider the human's resolve. Then, with a single, stiff nod, he turned and left, signaling that their meeting was over. The tension in the air eased, but only slightly. The battle for Viridian was not over, but it had shifted. It was no longer just about fighting the invaders. It was about ensuring that Viridian would remain free, no matter the cost. The final confrontation was now inevitable. The humans and the Viridionians had fought with everything they had, and though the invaders had been pushed back, a new threat loomed on the horizon. The Galactic Council had arrived, and their demands were clear. Viridian was to fall under their control, a world that had just been freed by the very humans the Council had ignored for so long. Captain Marcus Steele stood at the front lines, his eyes scanning the horizon. The Council's envoy had left, but their intentions were now obvious. The Viridionians had reclaimed their cities, their homes, but they were now facing a different kind of enemy. The Council might not have invaded Viridian with soldiers, but their words were sharp, and their demands were heavy. They don't get to decide what's best for us, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. This planet is not theirs to control. We fought to free it, and we will not let anyone take that freedom away. His words echoed through the streets, the message spreading quickly. Viridian was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a symbol of hope, of the right to fight for one's own future, and the refusal to bow down to any power, no matter how large. The resistance, bolstered by their newfound hope, rallied behind Marcus and his crew. The Viridionian people, who had suffered so much, now stood tall. They had already driven out the invaders, and now they faced the most important challenge of all, protecting the freedom they had earned. The humans had shown them what it meant to fight for a cause larger than themselves, and the Viridionians were ready to carry that torch forward. At a council meeting, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Marcus and Rylan, the Viridionian resistance leader, stood side by side. The Galactic Council's representatives looked down at them with disdain, their tone dismissive as they addressed the two leaders. You've caused a disruption, one of the council members said, his voice sharp. This planet is under the control of the council. You will comply with our orders or face the consequences. Marcus held his ground. Viridian is not a piece on your chessboard, it's a planet with real people who have fought to survive. We're not interested in your control. We're interested in keeping Viridian free. The council member's face twisted into a sneer. You overestimate your position. The council has the power to enforce its will across the galaxy. Your actions will have consequences. Zoe Harris, standing off to the side, met Marcus's eyes, her face set in determination. We've seen what your consequences mean. Viridian fought for its freedom, and if you want to challenge that, then we'll fight for it again. Marcus turned back to the council, his voice unwavering. You're right about one thing, the fight isn't over. But you're wrong if you think you can break our will. Viridian is free, and the people who live here will decide their own future. Not you, not the council. And we'll defend that future with everything we have. The council representatives were silent for a moment. Their expressions hardened, but they could not deny the truth in Marcus's words. The humans and Viridionians had stood together and defied the odds. The council, for all its power, had no answer to the unity and strength they had shown. The tide had turned, and the galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity was no longer a species to be ignored. As Marcus and Rylan left the council chambers, the weight of the moment settled over them. They had won, Not just a battle, but a victory for every planet, every people that had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or abandoned. "We did it," Ryland said, his voice thick with emotion. "We really did it." Marcus nodded. "We didn't just fight for Viridian. We fought for every world that deserves the chance to decide its own future." And as the humans and Viridionians watched, the stars from the surface of a free Viridian, they knew this victory would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The message was clear. Humanity would always stand up for what was right, no matter the odds. In this part, the battle for Viridian is concluded with a victory for the humans and the Viridionians. Despite the looming threat of the Galactic Council, Marcus Steele and his crew stand firm, asserting that Viridian will remain free. The conclusion reinforces the message of hope and unity, showcasing humanity's ability to fight for what's right no matter the challenge. The narrative comes full circle, showing that the fight for Viridian was more than just a victory on a single planet. It was a message to the galaxy. The war was over. The invaders had been driven from Viridian, their command shattered. The humans and Viridionians had stood together, facing overwhelming odds and refusing to back down. They had fought not only for survival but for something much more important: freedom. Captain Marcus Steele stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Below, the streets were alive with the sounds of celebration, but there was no cheer as loud as the one in his heart. Viridian had been freed, and its people were beginning to rebuild. The once ruined cities were showing signs of life again, and for the first time in a long while, there was hope. Beside him stood Lieutenant Zoe Harris. She too watched the city below, her face softened with relief. "It's hard to believe it's really over," she said quietly. "We've come so far." Marcus nodded. "It's a new beginning for all of us. For Viridian, for humanity, for everyone who believes that freedom is worth fighting for." Zoe smiled faintly, her eyes bright. "We've given them a chance to rebuild, and this time it's on their terms." The Viridionians had not only reclaimed their planet, but they had also regained their sense of purpose. They had fought alongside the humans, learning what it meant to stand up for their world, their people, and their future. Now, with the invaders gone and the Galactic Council's demands rejected, they were free to chart their own course. Rylan, the leader of the Viridionian resistance, approached from behind, his face radiating both exhaustion and pride. "Captain Lieutenant, we've received word from the other planets. The galaxy is watching what's happening here." Marcus turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "And?" Rylan's expression was serious. "They're taking notice. The Council is still trying to recover from what happened, but we've sent a message to every world. Viridian is free, and that's not going to change. Your victory isn't just a victory for us, it's a victory for all who want to stand up against oppression." Zoe's voice was filled with hope. "We've shown the galaxy that the fight for freedom is worth it, that when the people unite, they can overcome anything." Marcus's eyes were fixed on the distant horizon, his thoughts turning inward. This victory isn't just ours. It belongs to every world, every person who believes they deserve to live without fear. "We didn't just free Viridian, we gave it back its future." Rylan nodded, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've given us more than freedom. You've given us hope. Viridian will never forget what you did for us." The celebrations continued into the night, the stars shining brightly over the planet, a symbol of the new beginning that had begun. The Viridionians and humans gathered together, sharing stories and forging new bonds, united by their shared experience. For the first time in a long time, there was no division, no separation, only unity. As the night wore on, Marcus stood, with Zoe and Rylan, watching the stars. It was hard to imagine that not so long ago they had all been fighting for survival. Now they were fighting for something even more powerful, the right to choose their own destiny. Marcus spoke softly, almost to himself. "This is just the beginning. There are other worlds out there who need to know that they're not alone, that humanity will stand with them, just like we stood with Viridian." Zoe smiled. "And we'll keep standing. Together." The future was uncertain, But for the first time in a long time, the galaxy seemed full of possibility. Viridian had been freed, but the spark of hope they had ignited would spread far beyond the planet's surface. And the message was clear: humanity would always fight for freedom, no matter the cost.